Hello and welcome. 3 years back, we started a special series called Fintech Dairy to cover the fintech story diligently. We have been covering the fintech founders, CEOs, investors, leaders, experts, and also the most burning topics of the fintechs. Every Thursday, we bring you a new story. Today, we have a special episode where I have three experts with me, and we are going to discuss CBDC, the most trending and burning topic all over the world. India's central bank RBI has recently released a concept note on the CBDC, and there are many things that the concept note showcases, such as RBI's intention that they are very serious about CBDC. They want this to be built on trust and transparency, and this should be programmable and it should use the best technology. RBI has already showcased its disapproval for cryptocurrency, but they had said that they will come with CBDC at an appropriate time. Well, here we are with the concept note on CBDC, followed by a pilot project very soon. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. And let me introduce you to the speakers that we have for this particular panel discussion. And the topic of this discussion is the advent of digital rupee, decoding RBI's proposal. And my panelists for this session are Mr. Govind Gurnani, the former Assistant General Manager, Reserve Bank of India. Govindji, glad to have you.
Fine. Good morning. Good afternoon, sir.
My next speaker is Mr. Ashish Agrawal, Vice President and Head of Public Policy at NASSCOM. Ashishji, glad to have you.
Happy to be here, Amol.
And my next speaker is Mr. Prasanna Lohar, Chief Executive Officer of Blockstack and President India Blockchain Forum. Prasanna, glad to have you. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's begin the conversation. Prasanna is shortly going to join us. I think there are some technical glitches because it's raining heavily in Mumbai, and I'm sure he's trying to find the best network for himself. But let's discuss the CBDC. And I think I should have asked the first question about the technology and the infrastructure itself because one of our panelists is unable to join. So Ashish, let me come back. Let me start with you itself. How do you look at CBDC? What difference do you think the CBDC will make, considering the concept note and the features that RBI has showcased? Obviously, it's not the final stage that we are still far away from the final and the pilot project as well. But a lot has been discussed and RBI has given its view. So to start with, Ashish, what is CBDC according to you, and how do you see the panning out in the country?
Thanks, Amol. So when you think of CBDC, right, in the larger context, what we're really looking at is adoption of a new technology in something which will have a wider impact in the payment space. And when you think about it, and it all started with the announcement that the finance minister made about the intent of the government, and now you see that translating into the concept paper which RBI has released. So if you think about it, when you're trying to implement a CBDC, which means not just a digital payment of money which is printed, but a digitally native currency, I think at a first level it requires a whole shift in our technological architecture and thinking around that. For a regulator to take a lead in that means it is an evolution for us to be adopting a new technology, which we have been more or less, watching or trading when you think of the virtual cryptocurrency space. So that's the first point. And when you think about it, and when you think about a regulator coming out with a central digital currency, the important thing for it to do is for us to consider is the design element. And I think that is what the industry and everybody is looking forward to, because the design element will determine what potential this currency offers in terms of efficiencies, in terms of innovation, in terms of more security. So we know that you can save the cost of printing paper and all that. But what is beyond that? So I think the entire potential of what is beyond that is to be explored. And in this, we are together with the world. So it is not that this is something which is unique in India. I think in that sense, over 80 odd countries are already attempting this. So it is good to see RBI take these baby steps, and we can definitely talk about what it means for consumers, what it means for industry, and what it means for government itself in more detail as we proceed. But definitely a very positive step in as a first step to adopt the technology.
No, sure. I think the god of network is not in our favor actually. The Prasanna is still trying his best, and even I logged off for a second because of some network disruption. Uh, I hope by the time RBI launches CBDC, the network will be with the great speed of 5G, and let's hope there will be no interruption. So thanks Ashish for that meaningful opening remarks. Govindji, let me come to you and take your perspective. You already heard Ashish. Now, you have been also, with the RBI, and I'm sure this conversation have been brewing with RBI since really long. So, in your view, what is the objective of CBDC, and how do you think it will pan out in the country like India?
It is a more safe and secure, sound and efficient interoperable payment system, CBDC, when we will introduce. It will reduce the dependency on our cash, and it will have a lesser overall currency management costs. So it is a more robust, efficient, trusted, regulated, and legal tender-based payments, including cross-border payments. Its main objective is to boost the digital economy.
Okay, noted your points. But Govindji, I think the digital and the cash is again a very a controversial topic now because the cash is still in the system, though the digital has picked up really well. Going
Hmm.
ahead, do you really believe that the CBDC will take over cash, or maybe cash will be? I'm not saying completely wiped out of the system, but maybe CBDC or all this digital mode of payments will kind of give a competition, heavy competition to the cash.
No, I don't think so because cash will always remain there, and this CBDC will be introduced as a complement and not as a substitute. It will be
Right.
always as a complement to the system and not as a substitute. It will never substitute. So cash will remain there, and on the this side this will be complement, and that is what BIS also told, that you can't substitute the CBDC with the cash. It will also remain there.
Sure, noted your points. मतलब रोकड़ा रहेगा यहाँ पे अभी भी. So,
रोकड़ा रहेगा.
so Ashish ji, now let me come back to you and ask a very specific question. Now the concept note on CBDC is here, which we were waiting for. RBI was very clear that they will come with an CBDC at one point of time, and they have shared a lot of features here. My question to you is, because you're representing an industry body, you're also crafting policies, you're talking to the policymakers. How has been the industry's reaction? Is the industry ready to adopt CBDC? Do you think that the industry is quite happy with the CBDC proposal itself? Again, RBI has not very specifically clarified whether they will come with a retail CBDC or a wholesale CBDC. That will be depend on the project which will be successful. But how's the industry looking at this whole project?
So, Amol, the larger view in the industry is that the fact that RBI has followed up with the initial thinking into a structured concept note, and has definitely shown its vision to take this forward. It's a very positive step. And once you understand that it's a positive step, I want to just kind of unpack it. How so? So one, when you think of RBI's role as a regulator and as somebody who manages the currency function, given the technological nature of CBDC, one, we definitely see a huge role for the industry in making it happen. Just the making the technological rails for it, to be implemented. And then there are various aspects of this. So what we believe is that both the wholesale part of it and the retail part of it eventually will come into play. And when you start thinking about it, there are certain things in terms of, even let's say cybersecurity. So if this is going to be widely adopted, there is a huge role for again for the industry to ensure that the right tools are available so that this is something which is secure. Second thing which is going to be important is also what level of anonymization is offered. And then again, it has a technological role, it has an ecosystem role in terms of what is the role of various stakeholders in ensuring that level of anonymity. And if you look at the token part of this, I think what is making sense from the concept paper is the indirect model. So when you look at the indirect model, then I think there's a huge opportunity to be able to think beyond just the banks as the potential intermediary to enable various functionalities using a CBDC. Now, what is the shape and size of these intermediaries? What is the regulatory architecture around it? I think all of that is ahead of us, and we have to see. And lastly, I think so the entire premise of CBDC is going to be use case driven. So
Right.
one of the use case, for example, again, is going to be international remittances, and we can talk about it more. But the point is that for RBI to make CBDC successful, it has to compete with the physical rupee. It has to compete with the digital money that we are currently using in form of electronic money, and that unless that value proposition is established, the adoption will be a huge challenge. So it is one part is technology and regulatory, and the second part is the adoption challenge. And I think that is where a lot of role for industry will also come in, not only on the technology side of this entire proposal.
Okay. Quite interesting, Ashish. I will obviously discuss that international remittances, which is again a very, very big topic. And you have to also see whether the CBDC by any chance will cover it, because there are no clear maybe directions or features specifically about that in the concept note. But uh, going to, how will it actually boost in terms of financial inclusion as well? Because whenever a central bank or any financial institutions launch any new product, uh, the bottom line is always a financial inclusion is what they say. So considering the CBDC again going to be a very what you can say the futuristic aspect, do you think it will anyway boost financial inclusion?
Yeah, it will surely boost the financial inclusion, and it has some clear advantages over other digital payment systems, as it is being sovereign currency. It ensures settlement finality. It reduces the settlement risk in the financial system. It will bolster the India's economy and enhance financial inclusion and make the monetary and payment systems more efficient.
Okay, okay, thank you. So let me, Ashish, learn from you. But before that, I would like to make a small announcement to all our, viewers, those who are watching this show. If you have any specific question to any of our panelists, please go ahead and shoot your question here. I will try my best to take that questions, and take with the panelists whatever question that you have, but specifically related to CBDC or this chapter. Prasanna, can you hear us? Prasanna, can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can.
Sure. So thanks for joining, Prasanna. I can understand it's raining heavily and there are a lot of network issues. But so on a technology perspective, obviously Ashish and Govind give a different view here. But on a technology perspective or in the futures of CBDC, how will CBDC be different from the cash that I have in my pocket, from the money that I spend, specifically through UPI or IMPS or RTGS maybe, or if I make it very softly, if you and me go for a lunch, and if you allow me to pay, so I will pay either through my cash, or maybe I will pay through the UPI, right? Once the CBDC comes, how will I pay?
CBDC.
Prasanna,
Typically, central banks.
yes, go ahead, Prasanna.
So typically, yeah. So typically, central banks
I think he's on mute.
Yeah, I think there is some issue with Prasanna. I think we are unable to hear you. Maybe you can check your uh, system. Maybe I will come back to you in a minute. Meanwhile, you can check. So Ashish, let me come back to you again. What difference do you think, Ashish, will it make in a typical industry level? Because there is also logic that a lot of SMEs, MSMEs, small businesses will be able to pay instantly. They will have a great leeway, in terms of paying this over the cash, or maybe settling the payments immediately.
So I think for our audience, it is maybe useful to understand it from an industry perspective in two contexts. One is the tech industry, and second is the user industry. So I think what you mentioned is more from a user industry perspective. So one of the things I think which would be good is that, given the fact that a CBDC is a programmable capability built into it. What it means is that it can work along with smart contracts. Is that, at least from a specific program perspective, if money is meant for certain specific program, like for example, even money directed as agriculture credit, right, and so on and so forth. I think in all of those areas, it is possible to make much more directed interventions, and also perhaps minimize or eliminate leakages. So from that point of view, I think it's very useful. From an MSME point of view in general, I think all I can think of it is that, at least in the context of government procurement, and if government is adopting CBDCs, and they are able to do so, so that's a question mark as of now. And if and when they are able to do so, then I think a lot of issues around contractual obligations being addressed in a prompt manner, a lot of that can be addressed through the programmability built into the contracts, and then triggering payments through CBDCs. So in that sense, I think that's one big set of benefits that can come in for the industry. The other set, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is that, look, today we have wallet providers, we have e-commerce, and we have payment processors, and so on and so forth. They are used to business in a certain manner. So I think immediately when you bring in CBDC, this technology, my sense is it will offer an opportunity for all of these players to integrate with the functionalities which or to build functionalities on top of what RBI designs. And that is something that we hope is part of the design itself. And what that means is that industry needs to be brought into the discussion at this stage in a significant manner, not when the design and architecture is all finalized.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Noted your points, Ashish. Prasanna, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible, and thanks for I think all the efforts. So, do you want me to repeat the question, or you already have the question with you?
Yeah, so I understood, and I appreciate efforts, or rather the suggestions, guidance by Ashish sir. So I think central bank digital currency, which is something which is going to be helpful for many countries, rather every country, to improve their GDPs out there. And looking at the aspiration of BIS and all the countries, it is being mandated that we need to issue central bank digital currency with an attention that how do we create a financial equilibrium for every citizens out there in every country. Now, so far, what we have seen, the way we used to operate our reserves or our currency. Typically, there are two or three types of the currencies typically a central bank holds. One of them is a cash, which is being backed by the liquidity of a central bank. Another one is a electronic currency, which is between banks or some kind of it is owned by banks as well as owned by some of the commercial banks. So now, when you talk about overall ecosystem and the way payment transaction happens for a retail side of it, it has a lot of cost around that to handle the cash, to manage the cash, to move the cash from one location to another location. And apart from cash, even in the electronic or a digital transaction, which typically we'll see at IMPS, UP and all, there is an at the end of a day settlement process, or called as the operation process, which is backed by human beings, and which sometimes it could be error prone. And we are sitting on that kind of a manual process since so many years together. Now imagine you bring on a complete some portion of that liquidity as a part of a completely electronic, as a form of a digital currency. So it is a complementary to your cash, it is a complementary to the existing currency, wherein it will be part of the KRA, or it will be part of a balance sheet of a central bank. But if you really see overall advantages, you are doing away with the cost which will have a managing cash or a printing paper currency, so on. And furthermore, if you see, lot of corruptions does happen because of cash. Typically we see in many more instances, those things will be avoidable. And the way we will craft the architecture of the CBDC, it could be blockchain based or without blockchain also. But ultimately we need to see how a traceability of every currency which we can do. So where blockchain comes into the picture, gives that attention, yeah, we can track each and every currency how it is being utilized. So that could be the way to look at it. And furthermore, if you really see year on year, CBDC opens up many more instruments. What we have seen, say example, savings account, current or mutual funds, which is backed by current currency. CBDC comes and gives lot many use cases where, apart from handling cash or apart from having a digital kind of a discipline, you will have many more other instruments which can, like micro payments, micro lending, or giving back those DBT benefits to the end users without any of the corruption in intermediate ways. Those things can be done easily with the CBDCs. And if you look at how a CBDC can be implemented, which we'll discuss further on,
Correct.
just to say in a nutshell, CBDC is a form of a digital currency. It is not something like cryptos we typically hear about. It is a completely same crypto, but typically backed by regulation, and which is a part of an asset, which is the liquidity of a country. So that's how we need to see how a CBDC of a one country is compatible with other countries, so that we'll have a maximum benefit for the world. Yeah.
No, sure. Again, quite meaningful, Prasanna. But let me, take the first question which I had shot to you, and I want you to, quickly answer that. And my question was very simple for the better understanding of the readers or the viewers of ETBFSI and in general, that how will actually CBDC work? I mean, is it different from the UPI or RTGS or IMPS, or the cash is in my pocket? And if I give you a simple example, just some time back, is if we go for a lunch and if you allow me to pay, I will pay either through UPI by scanning a QR code, or I will just pay the cash, right? If CBDC comes into the picture, do I have a third option to pay through CBDC, or something like that?
So typically in any implementation, what we have seen, CBDC is not the only interface, right? What we talk about UPI or IMPS, which gives a wow experience, at least in Indian context, but there are many other countries where they do not have a UPI kind of a ecosystem. So while we talk about it's a fraction of a immediate transaction which is happening through UPI or IMPS or NEFT or RTGS, but in the back end, the overall system is comprised of acquiring system where the transaction is happening, followed by the intermediary association, so-called Mastercard, Visa, and then your issuer system, and backed by a core banking system. Now imagine the overall architecture which we have spent for a one transaction, right? Say example UPI, we are spending so much, right? Now if you talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum, they do not require this kind of infrastructure. They require just one node at one wallet. So CBDC comprised of four things. It's a wallet where this wallet belongs to a customer, and that wallet is connected to a ledger system with some kind of a APIs, and in the backend your core banking system or a central bank ecosystem. Now, and can you imagine if this kind of architecture is there? You are doing with so many servers, so many manual processes. So while
Right.
a WoW experience always remains there for end user through CBDC or UPI, but there are a lot of things in the backend which can be streamlined. So one of the another best example here is that we do cross-border payment, right? Suppose Amol wants to send the money to some person who is sitting in US. So today it's not a technical challenge; it's all the process which we define on the SWIFT mechanism. So SWIFT is a system would have a better technical solution to send that immediate message from one country to another. But the way we have grafted inter-country laws or inter-country regulatory guidelines, it takes a lot of time. In the sense, it takes sometimes 3 days or 7 days to realize that transaction. With technology coming to picture, we'll do away with a lot of those intermediaries processes, intermediaries man in middle, and it will be a wow experience to send money, just like you, the way you send money from UPI from one location to another. Apart from that, your settlement will be instant. Say example, you are doing transaction on a CCD or a shopper stop, where the actual money
Noted.
received by shopper stop is the next day, because the typical process of a settlement and reconciliation takes one more day, wherein the all files will come from association or a switch and the core banking, and then at the end of those, payouts will happen to the actual merchant. With CBDC coming into picture, payouts will happen instantaneously. We don't have to rely on that extra additional efforts, extra additional costs. So that's the difference between the current UPI or IMPS or tomorrow CBDCs, which is going to come. Yeah.
Right. Noted your points, Prasanna. Quite meaningful one. Let me come to Govindji once again, and add more. What I can say, take this conversation ahead with you now. Uh, so you. I mean, we all understood how the technical difference is, how the instant payment will play a major role here. But Govindji, the immediate question that we have is when the CBDC will come, who will be the early adopter? And in terms of adoption, do you think that the RBI or maybe the policymakers, should look at uh, top industry players or maybe just governments, to use the CBDC first as a case study, and then maybe it should pass on to the industry at large or maybe retail at large? Who do you think, according to you, should be the early adopter of this, CBDC?
Banks and governments,
Okay.
only two first they will start.
Okay.
After that, public will start.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ashishji, what do you think? Do you think that the bank and government should be the early adopter? Because, considering 140 crore people of the country at retail level, it might be a massive, to start with, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with Govind ji because and it is going to be very meaningful because just government adopting it from its treasury management function, bond issuance, all of that. It is a very important function, and we can have a lot of efficiency, and we can actually make sure at least the wholesale currency part can be well developed at a level where the government and RBI can make it work. And once we do that, I think there is also a merit in thinking about the inward remittance use case.
Yeah.
Because today the cost of inward remittance is about 5 to 7%. And typically, people who are transmitting it, these are Indians, these have FCNR account or NRO account and all of that. So it is not about the fact that how much time it takes, but it is about the cost of the transfer, which is more. So I think how RBI can create an ecosystem where banks are incentivized to adopt such a mechanism, which will obviously, in some sense, lower their margins, or that's the analogy when you think of reducing the cost at some level, and some of it could be pure efficiency. And I think if that can be a first retail case for it to be adopted, I think that would be great. But there are just a couple of points which I also want to build on what Prasanna said. Is that one, unlike an account-based system, in a token-based retail CBDC, just like you can lose physical cash, you can also lose the CBDC. So therefore, the security protocols are going to be important. People's understanding that you can lose that money, I think that's going to be important. And the second part about this, the entire cross-border element, I think the important thing is interoperability with the protocols of different countries. And there, I think RBI right now is not part of the MBridge at BIS, which is already. I think in September they have already completed a set of transactions, and where they and the report will be published, I think, later this month. So I think what I would also think is that from an industry perspective, it will be a good indicator for RBI to now potentially start participating in that forum, because that will really set the stage for the next set of work which we hope to see on the CBDC coming up.
So I have many questions. I think the participants have also started asking questions now, which I will take it. But on what you said, Ashish ji, let me take one question with all of you very quickly before we go into details. Is it a FOMO moment for RBI? Is it that the other regulators in the country have come with a CBDC and RBI doesn't want to feel left out? So that's why they have come with a concept note. Do you feel so, Ashish ji?
So, see, RBI, India, we have a very important role in the global economy. We have consistently said that we want to be leaders in payment systems, right? Even various reports have said this. We also want to build our own self-reliance in various payment technologies. So I think for RBI to now clearly come out with a plan to say that we are going to move forward and we will have CBDCs. I don't think it's a case of a FOMO, but I think we would say that RBI has been very cautious in its approach, and rightly so. And that probably explains the fact that they probably have taken more time than others. And the second most important thing is also that I think the actual use case and the value proposition of CBDCs is still something that has to be proved. So it is not very clear, at least in India, given the fact that we have so many efficient and I might say even cost-effective payment systems, that there is a strong use case for adoption of a CBDC, at least at a retail level. So therefore, to say that RBI is guarded and now RBI is coming out with this idea, I think it's something that we need to wait and watch, because the last thing that RBI would want to do is to go down this road and then be faced with a situation where adoption becomes a significant challenge. I think therefore it is good for RBI to take one step at a time, and based on how the entire ecosystem develops, accordingly adapt and come up with something which is workable. Because typically, if you see regulators or government, they don't push for a technology; they push for a use case, right? So it is not about, otherwise why not push some other technology? So technology is just a way of doing things. So that's the point. I think that we should do.
I think there are excellent view. I think just about use cases will drive what CBDC will come. And just to support your question, which was very good question, which CBDC should go ahead? I think types of CBDC, wholesale or retail, right? I think in retail, it's a larger community comes into the picture, end user community picture. There are other privacy, security, accept will come into the picture. Wholesale is so easy. Wholesale is so easy, less of stakeholders and less of the responsibility to make it happen, wherein we can really justify, testify the overall architecture and overall feasibility of a CBDC. Why? Because CBDC is not a technical implementation, but the first step of a CBDC is that how out of those 100% liquidity, take out some of them as a part of a CBDC around some of those important monetary policies, right? And followed by the second step, which is that architecture. Is it DLT or non-DLT? Third is is it account-based or token-based? And fourth is whether it is a wholesale or retail. So while we have these three things ready, then we can decide whether it is a retail or wholesale. And wholesale makes easy because as Ashish sir was guiding about Ambridge, or there are Project Helvetica and Icebreaker, which is come up. And I think almost at least 20 plus countries are now collaborating, which is very, very important. Rather, we think at in-house CBDC, for example, we are announcing our wholesale CBDC down the line this year. But at the same time, we need to see how other countries are doing. Say example, one of the CBDCs, for example, e-krona, which is a Sweden, which is a non-DLT, which is not blockchain based. So how do you create an interoperable? I think these are all the other aspects also while we decide which one to go first. Yeah.
No, sure. So on this part, quickly, I will take Govindji's view also. So Govindji, is the time right for RBI to come with a CBDC? Because you were discussing whether RBI is doing it because of FOMO, which is fear of missing out, or just the time is completely, in favor of RBI. What do you think, Govindji?
एक्चुअली कॉमन मैन अभी जो प्राइवेट वर्चुअल करेंसी के तरफ जाता है उसका वहां से ध्यान हटाने के लिए आरबीआई सीबीडीसी को लाना चाहता है. मेन तो उसका वही ऑब्जेक्टिव है कि लोगों का जो अभी ध्यान प्राइवेट क्रिप्टो करेंसी की तरफ से, विच इज नॉट सेफ, विच इज नॉट सिक्योर, विच इज नॉट लीगल टेंडर इवन.
Absolutely.
So to give the people a fair, secure and legal tender currency, RBI is bringing the CBDC.
Right.
That is the main objective.
Sure. I think that's a very good point, Govindji. And in fact, maybe we can debate on whether RBI is making all things clear or not. But I think we should remember one thing, that RBI has always been clear about cryptocurrency, that they're not in favor of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
One point they made it since last 4 or 5 years they have been talking about it. So meaningful thoughts. So let me take some questions also. I think we have started receiving a lot of questions. So the question which is sent by Aviral Tripathi, he asks, how will banks be segregating between account balances, in bracket account balances is equal to e-rupees, and what is going to be the conversion mechanism? Would it be done at the public and private banks end itself? Prasanna, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, I think it is still not clear as far as the Indian context concern how a central bank, wherein a central bank, rather I would say a Reserve Bank of India, will have its own core banking system. Okay, so a use case can define how it's going to happen. Say, example, we say we are launching a wheat coin or a sugar coin, which is backed by CBDC infrastructure and which is being utilized in some of those communities. That, back there in Punjab for a wheat coin, or say, example, sugar cane coin in Maharashtra, wherein the user followed by its wallet and followed by the overall API infrastructure to a bank, and back from that bank to the central bank core banking. So that's how it's going to happen. But the very first step, how monetary policies will take, that which is very, very important aspect, which is still not clear. As far as the RBI's concept note is concerned, they have said they will consider and will assess all of these aspects very easily. So one aspect to look at the overall FOMO or why we are late, rather our CBDC will be one of those world class, because we are sitting on Aadhaar, which is digital identity, which is required for CBDC. We are sitting on a very good payment infrastructure, which is required for CBDC. But in a nutshell, the question which you asked, it is still yet to be clear. And during the study, while we are assessing technology, we'll assess these things also for a smaller use cases. Now, here is a catch. For example, some of the countries like Bahamas, they launch their CBDCs, and they say, example, typically when you put money into your bank account, we need to give an interest out there. But in digital currency, how do I really decide how much interest rate I should give? So wherein they launched, they rolled it back, and they kept some limit of a CBDC just to make it a more prominent, mature. They said you can deposit a CBDC based currency only this much. So I think there are a lot of learning from other countries also. So interoperable study will make us understand how the whole movement from rather say example, there are 3 banks being selected in a first cohort at RBI. XYZ say example, which is not in the public, but ultimately all these banks inherently will report all of their ledgers to a central bank's core banking system.
Noted your points, Prasanna. So Ashish, I want you to take this question. You partly answered this, but I think this the viewer is very specific. He says, "Do you think really the CBDC will make a difference, for the small businesses?"
So
Ashish.
when you think of small businesses, right, again, you are looking at users, right? So the way the CBDC is being designed or proposed to be designed by RBI, from what we can get from the concept paper, is to closely mimic what is the functions or features of our physical currency. So, for example, like you have a 500 rupee note, similarly, you will have a token which represents 500 rupees, right? If you now compare it with the crypto world, in a crypto world, you could break up the token into infinitely small denominations, and you can then use it the way you want. So a lot of what is available as feature in a typical public blockchain cryptocurrency, a lot of those features or functionality may not be available in a CBDC environment, because we are trying to probably design a CBDC which closely mimics the physical cash. And the second point is, which Prasanna briefly mentioned, but I want to kind of underline it from a point of view of small business users as well as retail consumers, is that typically a business operates a current account in a bank, right? He gets no interest, he's operating current account, and he expects certain facilities. Now, if you think about a CBDC use case, then from that point of view, I think the way to assess is that it will still be a zero interest rate account, but what other benefits are you able to give as facilities over and above the traditional current account? So if you can't give much additional facility, then it is just a novelty. It is just a nice thing to kind of experiment with and be comfortable with. And if you now the point is, how do you pay interest? So if RBI goes ahead and says that it will be interest bearing, then there is a problem that you end up disintermediating the banks.
Right.
And if you don't do that, then how do you, even if it is maintained in a wallet, how do you provide for the fact that you can actually get some amount of interest on it? Because otherwise, what you're talking about is only very small sums of money, the same amount of money which you keep in wallet, which you are not bothered about keeping into an account where it earns interest. The same amount you will keep as CBDC. Because today it is possible in India that I can actually travel anywhere, do anything without having any physical cash because of UPI cards, debit cards. I can keep earning interest on my money and use it when I want. So that is the competition with CBDC. So unless there is a value proposition, I think adoption will be a challenge.
Right. I think value proposition and instant payments, the point that came earlier, I think are really meaningful here. Thanks, Ashish ji. Govind ji, let me come back to you. And since you sometime back said that the banks and the government should be the early adopters, my question to you is who should burn the cost according to you ultimately? Because the UPI is absolutely free, but because of MDR, a lot of fintech companies operating in payment space, lost a good business model which they thought they will build, and they moved to credit side. Considering CBDC is going to come, and if banks or maybe start adopting it, ultimately they will have to invest in a technology. How will they make return of their technology, or who should burn the cost of the whole CBDC? Even if bank doesn't come and someone else come, maybe other financial institutions or government, whom do you think, according to you, किसको चाहिए कि मतलब कॉस्ट बर्न कौन करना चाहिए इसमें?
आरबीआई करेगा ना, कि कैश के सब्स्टिट्यूट में आ रहा है ना
जी।
फिजिकल कैश की जगह पे आपको सीबीडीसी है, तो नेचुरली द कैश कॉस्ट विल बी borne by fully central bank and not anybody.
Okay. So do
In
you
case
think
of
that
will be borne fully, cost will be borne by the central bank, and it will be backed by the sovereign.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that's a very valid point, and I think if that's what happens, then I think there will be a lot of early adopters for sure
Can I
for this.
just comment on that?
Yes, yes,
Can I?
yes, Ashish. Yes.
Okay. So I think probably there could be some distinction between how we think of cost when we think of cash and when we think of CBDC, right? Because I agree with Govindji that RBI should take up the cost because it replaces the physical cash. But as soon as you start thinking of implementation, so typically what happens, a bank invest in handling cash, right? So there's a
Yes.
teller at the bank branch, and then you store cash and you do all of that. Now, if part of that will be replaced by investing in the technologies for CBDC, then that is a understanding which a bank will need to develop, that if I'm saving some cost on physical cash management and I'm now investing in technology, it makes business sense for me, right? And so one is in isolation a business sense, and second is, does it give me some competitive advantage? Can I now service my customers better? Can I provide certain other facilities? So I think the question of cost, I would think that it is still out there. And when as soon as you move beyond bank to payment processors and wallet providers and so on and so forth, I think the question becomes even more bigger for them.
Right.
Because for them to invest in any sort of technology, what is the business case for return? I think at this stage it may not be very obvious, and therefore we need to actively probably think about it so that we can align the incentive of the entire chain so that it can be successful.
Right, Ashish ji. In fact, because ultimately, to make it useful for at a large level, you have to involve all the players and all the ecosystem, and then the question will be, while implementing, who will burn the cost? Because ultimately there will be cost involved, even if you want to, bring some technology there. So there is another question I have, and it looks very important to me. So let me know if Prasanna, you can answer this. The question is about what will be the relevance of exchange rates with regards to CBDC. Will that be similar to today's mechanism in terms of exchangeability, hedging possibilities, etc.?
So I think there will not be much difference out there, right? So it will be more or less same, but at the same time, we need to really see, because ultimately it is backed by the liquidity of every country. So the exchange rates, etc. I think the way it will be same, but we need to see if somebody wants to do a inter-country transaction, or is a cross-border transaction, right, or a remittance out there. So that moment, apart from this functional question, there are other technical questions. How do we do that? Do we, while every country, say example, today there are 90 plus countries are doing POCs, pilots, 10 plus are already live with some kind of a use cases like China's or some of the other smaller countries. So say example, all countries are on CBDC, uh, and now are we still utilizing same infrastructure which was earlier, or are we utilizing this CBDC? That's another question. We need to see how larger companies like IMF or the BIS, the KRA of a BIS is like, how do we really bring on all countries to create this better financial ecosystem, interoperable, scalable, or secure? So while this question is very very good, the answer is that there is no change for the exchange rate, but we need to see how interoperable CBDC can operate in a cohesive way. For example, India's CBDC is on X platform, which is not compatible with suppose US's CBDC. Then it's is not a really very good exercise, which typically we have seen, which is happening today's scenario. So that is why IMF again and again announcing ki while you are implementing, look at how can we have a interoperable standard on a CBDCs. There is a new business model for us fintech companies. They are now creating connectors for CBDCs, right? Well, the uh, certainly Switzerland is announcing something along with some of the four countries, or Singapore, Canada is done. So these connectors are coming and saying, yeah, we are compatible with one ledger system to another ledger system. Like Hyperledger has come up with the project Cactus, or there are many more. So that's a that's how we need to look at, apart from exchange rate question, which is not going to change. But these are the other aspect which will really drive how do we really implement CBDC.
Sure. Thanks, Prasanna. Ashish, so we partly discussed about the user case studies and how the industry will is looking at it. If I ask you very specifically, what kind of use cases would you like to see with the CBDC? Going ahead, like Govinji said, bank and government should use it. Maybe they can use it for bonds, maybe for welfare schemes, or procure systems, and so many things. But if I ask you specifically, because you have been dealing with a lot of industry body, I mean, being an industry body dealing with a lot of small and medium businesses as well, IT companies and all, what kind of case studies that you would like to see?
So, Amol, to be honest, right now the question of use cases in CBDC is still out there. But when you think about it, what Govindji said very early, industry helping government to adopt CBDC is going to be a huge opportunity for the industry. And if that is something that government and RBI can start working on and thinking about at an early stage and bring in the industry to say that how can we implement it, I think that is going to be an important thing for the entire ecosystem, and that is where industry can meaningfully contribute at the early stage. And I think the second biggest thing which we need to think about is to actually shift the focus from just the technology discussions to the discussion which is really crystal ball gazing, that what is it that we would like the CBDC to deliver for us. So, to your question, right, that as I'm now going and buying coffee, how can I make my payment using CBDC? So, what is the kind of a super wallet that we want to imagine, which will have all sorts of payment options, and how easily it will be possible for us to do this? So, I think those kind of ideation needs to happen. At some point in time, we want hackathons, competitions where such ideas can germinate. And one thing which I think which I want to link is the recent step which the regulators have taken, which I think RBI is anchoring, is the inter-regulator regulatory sandbox. So I think that is an idea which has just been proposed a few days back, and I think it should come about soon. And I think CBDC is a very good example where you put it into that inter-regulatory sandbox and get all the regulators and industry together to create use cases for security markets, use cases for insurance industry, and so on and so forth. Because payment by itself has no use case, right? It is always in relation to a service or a good. So it is those and if you think about financial services as the most adjacent, then I think it is the fintech sector where the initial use case from an industry point of view should develop.
Govindji, do you want to add here specifically on the user case studies or what kind of case studies RBI should look at?
No, yes, then very good answer. So no addition required, I think so.
Okay, sure. So, my question is also Prasanna specifically on the cross border, and I would like you and Ashish to add that because that is one point Ashish, spoke about earlier. Specifically on the cross border side, there are still, a lot of doubts which the people have. What kind of stand do you think, Prasanna, RBI should specifically take in CBDC when it comes to cross border, considering the remittance is really huge in India, and we have that big market there.
Yeah, so I think earlier also I mentioned when you talk about the CBDC infrastructure, it comprises of the ultimate people, retail or wholesale, wherein banks are involved, followed by a wallet system which is the way we have a UPI, Google Pay or Phone Pay kind of a wallet systems. Followed by a digital identity, which will really help to get on board and having a right identity on that overall infrastructure. Where, say, example, we have Aadhaar, so that we should utilize the Aadhaar ecosystem out there to onboard customers. And while we have lot of apps, say example, Google Pay, Phone Pay, Yono, and many more, how do we create that SDK which will go and plug and play as an SDK for CBDC, right? While riding on the existing infrastructure. So certainly in the backend system, we have a ledger system which is backed by maybe blockchain or non-blockchain. When we talk about a non-blockchain, so ultimately the aim of CBDC to create a better sustainable model to do away with the man in middle, do away with the settlement life cycles operations, then we have an option only remains with the blockchain. For example, eCrona was on non-blockchain. Now they are thinking of how do we come onto the blockchain network. So eventually, we need to look at how a blockchain network or a blockchain ecosystem backed by right smart contracts can be utilized. Here, we can utilize existing ecosystems like UPIs or IMPS, which are like built by various third-party service providers. They need to see whether or we need to create another infrastructure which is helping for customer onboarding on a right identity followed by right wallet, which is connected through APIs and smart contract in the backend blockchain architecture, which is talking to the backend core banking systems. So that is an architecture we need to look at how it can be useful. Now, other aspects. How do we do it? Like Ashish sir was talking about whether it is account based or token based, and even our mentor Nandini Lekani has said it should be a token based, rather just to, or how do we really take care of a privacy of every customer out there. So that is another aspect we need to really assess before actually rolling it out to the overall mass segment. So that's why bring on the architecture for wholesale, study it properly, assess scalability and security part. Because blockchain network, when we talk about, say example, India, we may always look at a TPS of a 20,000 TPS. Maybe UPI has reached to the 5,000 TPS or so on. But I think when CBDC come into the picture, it will get penetrated into not only in payment ecosystem, but many more other instruments, lending, wealth, and everybody out will be utilizing down the line 5, 6, 10 years. So I think that's how we need to see a futuristic architecture down the line, maybe 10 years. Not only payment, lending, and many more other ecosystems will be riding on the CBDC infrastructure. Today we have UPI. Tomorrow we are talking about account aggregator, or later on we are talking about ONDC. We are talking about SME ecosystem on ONDC. So I think largely we need to look at that kind of architecture and slowly evolve. So one more angle I wanted to touch upon the question which you asked: is it a fear of missing out? And where you can see, I think there could be three aspects. So if you see the overall market cap of a cryptocurrencies, bitcoins or Ethereum is a large pie, right? It's not in India, but outside of India, a lot of countries are adopting with the right regulation. Second thing is the stable coins like USDT or Libra, right? Libra has given a threat to the overall ecosystem, but many countries adopted it initially, then say
Right.
no. And third is the fear from China or similar like countries where they are creating a parallel or giving a threat to USD or US dollar. So likewise, we should not miss out that game to be part of a CBDC. So it's very, very, very important for us also to accelerate that journey and be in that equilibrium where the transactions will happen on CBDC between China and other countries. And if you see we are not part of that, then we are certainly missing out that kind of transaction. And the fourth aspect, there are new economies are coming, gaming or esports, which millennials are driving. Where typically payments happen on NFTs, which is a crypto or a virtual digital asset. And in
Yes.
some other country it is okay, some other country is not okay. For example, in India. So what does it mean? While we have a UPI, while we have so many ecosystems available, but this set of a customer is doing a transaction which is not aligned with the regulation. So if you bring on that CBDC experiments out there, it's very easy to adopt a CBDC on those economies. So these are the upcoming
That's a,
economies.
that's a that's a quite meaningful and a realistic points, because a lot of people have questioned, what is the difference between UPI, RTGS, IMPS, and CBDC? Because if UPI is very clean and clear, why should I go for CBDC? So I think your answer helps, Prasanna, in terms of UPI and all this have still limitations. But by any chance, in a metaverse world or a Web3 world, we need a global payment system, which this CBDC can solve the problem. Quickly, Ashish, do you want to add a point on the cross border? What kind of benefits that your businesses will have with the CBDC, specifically on the cross border point?
So, I don't think from a business point of view there is any great benefit that we can see in terms of CBDC in the immediate future. But I just want to build a little bit on what Prasanna said. So, see, one unique thing between a UPI based or a card based payment and a CBDC potentially is its compatibility and feature prospects in a Web3 and a metaverse environment. And that potential can only be utilized if industry is having the ability to build on top of the architecture which RBI will propose. And to that extent, I think that is going to be a big factor in terms of its use in metaverse and Web3. And the other thing which I want to say from a cross-border point of view is that what will be good for RBI to think is to say that, look, currently the cost of remittance is this much percent, and we will target to bring down this cost to this much over a X number of period of years, and we plan to use CBDC for that to assist in that endeavor. I think that those kind of a plan and a vision will help direct the focus in areas which are useful and relevant.
Sure. So I will take one last question with all of you. I think the time is now, watch is absolutely ticking, and we have just left with 2 to 3 minutes. And Govind, I will start with you. Since the proposal is already there and the final draft is yet to come, the pilot project is also yet to come. But if I ask you one question to all of you in two parts: one, what do you think RBI should not do going with the CBDC? And what is it that RBI should and must do going ahead with the final draft of CBDC? Govind.
Please repeat the
I
question.
Yeah, sure. So I want to say that the whatever the concept note is there right now, it's
Yeah.
in the primary it's in the primary level, right? When the final draft comes, आपको क्या लगता है कि उसमें क्या होना चाहिए और क्या नहीं होना चाहिए?
फाइनल ड्राफ्ट में तो यही योजना दोनों जो जो इसने कंसेप्ट पेपर में लिखा है वही आना चाहिए ना, उससे जैसे रिटेल एंड होलसेल दोनों तरह से आएगा। पहले होलसेल आएगा, उसके बाद रिटेल, दोनों उसी तरह आएगा। उससे ज्यादा और क्या हो सकता है इसमें?
Sure, noted.
Yeah.
Ashish ji, what do you think? Because RBI may also look at the suggestions. I'm sure, industry presentations. I'm sure Mr. Prasanna must have given already a presentation to RBI in terms of what
I think
else can be done.
I think just one suggestion from our side is that in the final draft or in the final implementation, they should actively call out the fact that they will engage with industry and involve the industry and give that focus on the industry, because together we can definitely build that value proposition, and that is the only ask that we have which we would request RBI to focus on.
Yeah,
So I
sure.
think
Prasanna already
same
gave his
way.
thumbs up.
I
If you
think
want to add.
if you look at other CBDCs, say example Switzerland or China or Cambodia, so all these countries has opened their concept paper to the industry and come back with the suggestions. And while we read this concept note, in the concept note itself there are two views. One of part says that we will assess or we are not okay with programmable currency. In another part it talks about consensus mechanisms, blockchains and all. So we need to really come out with the actual concrete next level of a concept paper, where the way it also they have considered very nice ways of grievances or contact center, and how do we take care of customer complaints and so on. But one part, apart from your technical and the functional, one part is very, very important, which Ashish is again and again emphasizing: use cases. I think next level of a paper, it should talk more of 20 use cases where CBDC is going to go, which will open up a lot of a bandwidth for next level of fintech to come out with some innovations which will support CBDC architecture. I think there is a long way to go. Looking at the current concept note, there is a long way to go to detail it down and look at what is that ultimate architectures look like here.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, how the ultimate architecture will look like, we have to just wait and watch. But we must appreciate the fact that RBI has already joined a bandwagon of the CBDC, and that's quite interesting. That we are not going to miss the digital bus at any cost. That's what the message that the central bank has given, and it's good to see the positivity in and around the BFSI ecosystem that the CBDC and the whole, the progressive part of the fintech has built in this ecosystem. I think again it's very unclear in terms of whether they will use a centralized system or a blockchain system, whether it will be used for a retail or wholesale. But again, it's quite interesting to have that proposal with us right now. And I must thank all of you. Thank you, Govindji, Ashishji, and Prasanna for sharing meaningful insights on the CBDC here. So once the RBI comes with the final framework, we'll meet again and discuss this topic in detail in terms of how that is going to pan out. But I think till now, I will just take your leave and just say thank you to all of you for watching this episode of Fintech Diary and sharing your questions and being part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.